April the what, 5th? 1979.
Yes,
Right.
1979.
And I'm talking with Daudie, Irene Markert, about the family history. Okay.
This is Grandpa Reynolds,
Right.
E.H. Reynolds.
Right.
And he was a
Chaplain?
well, he was chaplain of the Florida Senate
Mm.
one time. He was also a surveyor and surveyed a lot of the property and streets in the city of Leesburg during their early years in Florida. Grandma Reynolds, Margaret Catherine Reynolds, was a school teacher.
Now, what was her maiden name?
Cox.
Oh, yes. Okay,
Cox,
she's the Cox. Right.
Margaret
then.
Cox. And Grandpa Reynolds met her on his way to in the Civil War. And he met her because he spent the night at her father's house. And he met her, and he fell in love with her, and he made her promise to wait until he got out of the army, and then they would get married, which she did.
Oh,
They corresponded during the time they were he was in the war, in the service. And then they got married in Tennessee.
Now, is he the one that wrote the history
Yeah.
of the Civil War?
Mm-hmm.
The book that we have?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You have it? Mm-hmm. Well, this is the Grandpa Reynolds that did it. And he served in the war, during the Civil War. And then they got married and lived in Tennessee, in Paris, Tennessee. And until all the children were born in Tennessee. Mother, which was your mother's mother and my mother, was just a young girl when they moved to Florida. I don't remember exactly what age when they moved to Florida. And they moved up here in Sumter County and lived there then for many years. Until she lived there till she died, and he lived in Jacksonville till he died. Mm-hmm. So they really lived in Florida all the rest of their lives. Then the Markerts, now this is Grandpa Markert. Mm-hmm. He was born in New York, and he went with the group that left New York. It was a religious group, something on the order of the Quakers, on that order. And he went from New York out to Cedar Rapids, Iowa with that group, and they established their what is now their Manor refrigeration company.
Really?
And he was in that. He was in that for a while. He didn't stay
in. He was with that religious group?
Well, he was with that group, yeah.
Okay.
But he didn't stay too long with them after they moved to Cedar Rapids, because he went out, withdrew from them and went into Cedar Rapids and went into business for himself, which he ran a general store.
Wasn't that the Shakers?
Could be. I don't remember. It could be.
Started a manor?
It could be. Well, anyway, it was a group. It was a group anyway. Grandma Markert was born in Bohemia, and they came to this country when she was just. One story I heard was she was just a few months old. Another one was she was about 13 years old, but I don't know which is right. But I imagine when she was quite young, because there were 13 children, I think, in the family. And Grandma Mary, her name was, can't think of it right now, but I'll think of it. And Aunt Cora was her youngest sister. She was the oldest, and she's the youngest in the family. In the family. There were brothers and sisters in between. I have another picture.
Well, now, this isn't their children. This is her younger sister?
This is her younger sister. But this is my father, which is their oldest child, and this is his brother. Those are Grandpa and Grandma Markert's two children.
So they were raised together with Cora?
Well, she stayed with them for a while, and then she left and went back to Cedar Rapids, I think. I don't know how long she stayed with them, but she lived with them for a while. When she was about this age. I think that was the time they moved, when they were living here in Florida, but she was with them. I don't know whether she was up north or not.
I didn't realize that. So this is Carl,
Frederick Carl.
Frederick Carl.
This is Frederick William, I think his second name was, F.W. And Dad's was F. Carl. And
this, his brother?
Well, his brother's name was Frank.
Frank, that's right.
So then Dad and Mother grew up together and went to school together in Florida.
All right, how did the Markerts get to Florida?
Well, they just
From Cedar
moved.
Rapids.
They just moved out to Florida like tourists would. And
You don't know what year that was, or?
It was about in well, let's see. It was in early part of 1880s or something like that. I don't know just what year.
But grandfather, Fred C.
was born in Cedar Rapids.
Was born in Cedar Rapids.
Cedar Rapids.
And he went to Livewood, Florida?
Wildwood,
Florida.
Yeah.
When he was a young boy then.
Yes, and they went to school. He and Mother went to school together out in a country school. And Grandpa opened a big department store in the first department store there was ever in Sumter County. And he ran that business, and then he had the business in Cedar Rapids at the same time. And he, between the two stores. But Dad was grown by that time, and they were married. And I was born in Wildwood after they were married. This is Mother's wedding dress.
You don't remember the year they were married?
Well, I was born in 1890. They were married in 1895. Because I was born in 1897. And Brother was born in 1899. And so this is Mother and Dad, my mother and Dad here. And this is her brother. He was a great lover of horses and used to have a stable that's Uncle Leon.
Oh, that's Uncle Leon. I remember Uncle Leon.
Well,
he was so
him.
tall.
Yes, that's him. And this is my father here with your mother. So when she was born, that's me. These two are me.
Okay, let's go through the, or maybe you have that on the next page, the years that the children were born. Your brothers and sisters.
Well, I guess I should write those down, but I didn't know how to put them in here unless I just write them on a piece of paper and stick them in there. But anyway, this is another picture of Mother and Dad. You liked that one with this in here, and there was another picture in the other book, so I left that in and gave you this one. This is your mother.
She was born in 1906.
Edwin was born in 1904. And Brother in 1897, 1899, I was born in 1897. And this is the four of us. I think that's a cute picture of your mother.
It is.
And then we moved to Louisville. This was about the age we were when we moved to Louisville, Kentucky. And these are pictures that we took up there. Well, this was taken in Wildwood. This is a little neighbor boy lived right across the street from us, and the four of us. And these were taken in Louisville. Now, this was the only time Grandpa and Grandma Markert visited us while we were in Kentucky. After we moved away from Wildwood, they went out to Iowa, and they came back through Kentucky. The year before, he graduated from the seminary in Louisville.
Now, do you remember visits from
Sure.
your
Because I was
grandparents?
big like that, you see.
Yeah.
Yes, I remember.
Did they come often when you were in Florida? No, when you were in
Well,
Florida.
when we in Florida, the store was like where the lodge is. And we lived like where it's over here in this apartment here. So it was just across the corner of the park that we, so we knew, grew up with them until I was that age, you see.
When you went to Louisville.
So I remember them. Your mother probably wouldn't remember them so much.
She talked about grandmother a lot.
Yes.
Grandmother Markert.
Well, she remembered her probably, because I don't think she ever saw Grandpa Markert. I know she didn't, because after we moved from Florida, she was only 3 years old, and then when we came back, and we were 4 years in Louisville, then we came back to Macon in 1913, and he passed away in 13, so she never saw him again, you see, so she wouldn't have remembered him.
Well, then maybe she's talking about Grandma Reynolds that she remembered.
Well, she would, and I guess so. Grandma Markert came to see us once when they went to the funeral, Grandpa's funeral out in Cedar Rapids. They came back to Macon and visited us for just day or two or something, like a couple of days maybe. She might remember that. She was about 7 then.
But she said that
well,
there
Grandma
was a
Reynolds.
grandma.
Well, that was Grandma Reynolds.
Yeah,
Used
close
to come
by all the
yes,
time.
That was Grandma Reynolds that lived in Leesburg, and she used to come down to Tampa to see us. Now, this is Uncle John's children.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, two
Wait a
of
minute.
them.
Okay, John and Leon were twins?
No, Uncle John was a twin, but his twin died when he was born. Was still born, I think. But Uncle Leon was just a brother. There were 4 brothers. But Uncle John was a twin, and his twin was born. Was born
Okay, those were
born.
Grandfather Markert's brothers?
No, Reynolds.
Reynolds.
Reynolds,
Brothers. Your mother's brothers?
Yes, mother's brothers.
Leon, John.
First one was Eugene. No, the first one was Uncle Ed. And that was Miss Singer's father, but you didn't know Miss Singer either. Well, Miss Singer was the first grandchild on the Reynolds side. I'm the second one.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the first grandchild on the Markert side, but the second one on the Reynolds side. And Miss Singer was the first one. And when she was 14 months old, I was born. Mm-hmm. But her mother died when she was 10 days old. Mm-hmm. And so she never knew her mother. And she stayed with us off and on in Tampa, and also out here. She was with us in the work for several different periods of time. And let's see now where. Now these are Earl and Edwin, and these are Uncle John's 2 boys.
Oh.
And these are his 2 girls, Uncle John's 2 girls, and that's your mother and me.
Mm-hmm.
And these are just pictures of the 4 of us, 6 of us. It's for taken before. Now you can't realize that he was gone at that age.
What do you mean?
He died, in 39.
Yeah, in 39. But what do you mean he was gone at that age?
He died when he was about that age.
This age?
Mm-hmm.
He was
just
only
young. You see, he was only 39 when he died.
Oh, my. Well, younger than I.
Mm-hmm. So that made him young when he died, you see, comparatively young.
Do we have, Daudie, we do have in our family a history of heart disease, don't we?
Yes, quite a lot. And there are several, couple of Markert cousins that I know of that died of heart trouble in Cedar Rapids. And I think Grandpa Markert had it because he ate supper and went down and was throwing a ball and playing with his little grandson, and this fellow was gone and dead with his heart.
Grandpa Markert.
His father.
His father.
This one here.
Yeah, right.
You see, when he was only in his 60s, 68, he was.
My goodness.
And
then
my
Dad
had it.
grandmother. Yeah, my grandfather died at age.
He was 73 when he died.
Now he knew he had heart trouble, didn't he? Mm-hmm. When did he have
it for 9
the first?
years. He had the first heart attack. He went up to his funeral in 1939 in April. The 12th of April will be 40 years since Earl died. And he and Mother went up for the funeral. He came back. That was in April. He came back and had his first heart attack in June.
My goodness.
And then he lived for 9 years after that, before he passed away at 73. Edmund lived to be 70, and he died of heart.
And now you've had.
Well, I really only have had one heart attack.
Heart
that was this
attack.
last February, because the other time my heart was beating too fast, and he had to give me medicine to keep it from beating so fast. And also I had to take pills to keep the fluid down. Now, Grandma Markert died with what they call, I thought I never would forget it, but anyway, it was before they knew how to give medicine to reduce the fluid in the body.
Is it edema?
No, oh shucks, it didn't come to my mind. I know it's right on the end of my tongue, but it's hard for me to remember. Well, anyway, she sat 2 years in her chair before the fluid and couldn't get up or go to bed or anything, couldn't lie down because the fluid built up in the body, and finally it reached her heart, and that was it. But you see, they didn't know in those years how to give fluid medicines. If I didn't take the fluid, the same thing could happen to me. Mm-hmm. But you see, they know how to control it now, but they didn't in those days. That's our home in Macon.
Oh. Now, what years, you went from Louisville, Kentucky to
Macon in
1913.
1913.
That was when Grandfather was a director of the orchestra.
And well, he directed the orchestra all the time we were in Louisville, too. We had a family orchestra. Then we had a larger orchestra when we were in Macon, had some of the young people in the neighborhood and at the university that played with us.
Well, now, when did Grandfather start his lessons? When did he start playing?
Oh, he played all his life.
All his life.
Mm-hmm.
Did everybody else in the family play?
Grandma Markert said that she knew why he had such talent for music. She said all the time she was carrying him, Grandpa Markert was trying to learn to play the violin, and said all he did was squeak and squawk, and said she nearly drove her crazy. And she said when he was born, he was just full of music. And he played everything. He and I both played all kinds of instruments, you know. I didn't play so many. Well, I teach violin all the time. I have 3 violin pupils, starting an organ pupil this coming week.
Mm.
And one of my piano pupils is going to take organ. She's playing for the Baptist Church down in Arizona. And she's going to start on the organ. They have an organ like that, and she wants to take organ. And I've taught violin. Your mother was my first pupil on violin, and I've taught violin all my life. She never liked to teach violin. She couldn't stand it if they couldn't get a good tone on the violin. She averted it, but it doesn't bother me because I just make them get it right, you know. And so it doesn't bother me that way because I've had quite a few violin pupils.
Now, did Frank study music too?
No.
So Grandfather was the only
He was a dentist. He was.
Okay, I just wanted to know. How did he learn all of those instruments? Because he could teach anything.
Yeah, and I can too. I taught the chimes and the marimba and the orchestra bells, and the cello, the violin, the piano, and the organ, and the viola. Taught that for a while. I taught about 8 or 9 instruments.
Mm.
And he taught the wind instruments. He led a band before when he was just a young fellow. He had a band. But
what
just
talent.
He just ran in the band.
And you too, you know, you've got this ability to teach.
Well,
anything.
yes, I got it from him. And he and I worked together so much with the instruments, you know. But I don't have any problem teaching. I can teach violin. Of course, I'm not what you'd call a graduate on it or anything like that, but no one will teach little children and teach them how to play the violin. Well, you know what? Have you heard Paul? You've heard Paul play.
Yeah.
Well, I started him when he
Yeah.
was 5, and started Julie when she was 4. Well, she was 5 on the violin and 4 on the piano, and it's no problem. It takes a lot of patience and a lot of understanding of them, and then as they go older, they gradually go on to other things and other teachers, and they get things that I haven't taught them, but I've given them the
But you give them the foundation.
Yes, that's right. And in that way, they can get started, and then.
I wonder if you could ever figure out how many people you have given the foundation of music to.
And a lot of them are playing everywhere, at churches and Sunday school. You ought to hear Hilda play. She can play all over that piano on the hymns. You just can't imagine how she can play on that piano.
I can, because I hear Arthur.
Yeah, well, she does the same way.
Same thing, yeah.
She can just play everything. Now, these are pictures that were taken in Macon. This was just not long before we left Macon and went to the Canaries. We went to Lumpkin and then went to the Canaries. This is Grandma Reynolds.
Okay, you went from Macon to Lumpkin.
And stayed there a year and a half till the war was over.
Mm-hmm.
And that was your sister, 12 years old. Your mother. I keep saying your sister, my sister, but your mother. This was Brother just before we left Macon to go to Lumpkin. He didn't go to Lumpkin with us because they got married, you see.
Oh, uh-huh.
And these are just little pictures that I had of us.
I'll never forget my trip to Lumpkin, Georgia. I'll never forget that. That was just one of those happenings that you never forget.
I didn't remember that you'd been to
Yes,
Lumpkin.
Mother and Daddy
Took
you
you.
sidetracked and
you
took us to Lumpkin. I remember it so clearly. I stood in the pulpit where Grandfather had stood and everything.
And did you see our picture that was in the church there?
Yes.
Yes, they are still there.
Oh.
They thought so much of all of us as a family, you know. Now this is our passport pictures that we had on our passports when we went to the Canaries. And this is Santa Cruz, and here we are, and this is the house that we lived in, which was a 3-story house. I mean, this other was not a room up there. It was an outlook, you know. It was all glass around it, and you could see out, and you could get up there when it was raining or anything like that. This just had a railing around it, you see. There was a roof over the, flat roof over the 2 bedrooms, and then there was a flat roof over the rest of the house here, and it had a little patio in the middle, which was a square patio, and the rooms went around that patio. This was taken on the beach across on the other side of the island, in the Canaries. Look at our funny dresses and hats.
I know, but they would almost be in style today. Look at that skirt.
Look at the hats.
The hats are back in style, too. Now, when did you leave the Canaries?
1922, in November 1922.
I wish we could tell some of the stories. Remember the story about the tires? How Grandfather had to sell the tires off. What was that?
Well, we took a car over when we went to the Canaries, and all our furniture. When we got over there, gasoline was $1 a gallon, and we didn't have 2 cents to buy anything, and we had to eat little potatoes like this that we had to scrape. We didn't have nothing, didn't even have salt to put in the potatoes. Nothing but those little potatoes. We had potatoes for breakfast, dinner, and supper for days and days and days. Didn't have milk, no cereal, no anything.
Oh,
and didn't have any money. And finally...
Didn't Grandmother's china arrive all broken?
Yes, everything was broken. I don't think there was a single... If there was a cup left, there was no saucer. If there was plate left, there wasn't anything else. And top, and the potato dish was broken, or the dish and no top, and everything. And then we had a cabinet with the rounded glass on it, you know. One of those was broken out. Piano was water soaked on one end, but it played, so it was all right. We played on it for about 3 years. And but we sold the furniture then over there, and that gave us our fare back to the States when we left. But the car was new. We shipped it from New York, and it was new. We had a spare tire, and the first thing that we had, we sold that spare tire. I don't remember how much we got for it, and had a little money that we could buy some milk and a few groceries that we got at the store that was different from just potatoes. And then then we moved down to Santa Cruz to this house. It was the only house in Santa Cruz that was vacant. And it had a large room that we could use for chapel, for a meeting. It had a living room and had a bedroom and a sewing room on one side and the kitchen of the square patio. Then here it had the dining room, one end of it. On this side it had a room under the steps of on one side, and another bedroom, and then the chapel room and chapel, and it had a little hall that came in with the front door there at the front. Then upstairs it had 2 rooms up over the 2 rooms that were downstairs. And these were taken over in the Canaries. That's your mother. This was in our backyard over there. Now this was the consul and the vice consul and Edwin taken at the consulate there. And that's Mother. And that's all 3 of us. And that's Dad.
Do you remember the name of this mountain that was the volcano?
It's, I'll look at it. I've got it on a postcard. I'll look at the name of it and tell you.
But it was an active volcano.
Yes, you could see that it had this little smoke would come up now and then. And they had eruptions, with the small eruptions where the lava would run out and run down in the creek bed that it had formed, but nothing serious like it had been before. And that's his vice consul. His father was American consulate in France and married a French lady. And they spoke French and English and Italian. All these, they were Catholics, of course, being in France, they were Catholics. But the two of these two and Sugar and I all had a lot of fun together. And also the consul and he married a widow from Australia that had two girls, and they had a governess there for her two girls. And we used to all get together on Saturday afternoon, play badminton and have sandwiches and drinks and things like that. And the 3 or 4 of us used to hike over the mountains, all up and down these mountains along the road, you know. And these are some of the scenes that we'd see going up there, and that was a big fun.
Oh, lovely.
Now these are the cousins. This is Cora.
Now, you're back in the States now.
Yeah.
So, let's see, you came back into Tampa?
1922.
1922, okay.
November 22.
And you went right to Tampa
Yes.
and found a place?
Well, we landed in Port Tampa because the boats didn't come into Tampa at that time. They landed at Port Tampa, and then we went by train from Port Tampa into Tampa. And the old railroad station there is where we got off there. And we walked up a block. We didn't have any money. Enough money to pay for one room for a week. And that was all the money we had when we landed in Tampa. And not a roof over our head, and all the clothes we had were in just the trunks that we bought. Didn't have another thing in the world. When I look around and see what all we have here, the Lord has given us, you just can hardly believe when we landed in Tampa without anything. Not a penny, without a roof over our head for anything.
You never worried?
No.
No?
Oh, some of the children would come back to see us. One boy came not too long ago, and he said, I can remember when we didn't have so-and-so, and said, next day we had it. And that was true.
Yeah.
It was just one miracle after another, all the years that we've been to work. And those leaflets that I gave you in that book, in that thing, will tell you, it tells you a lot about it. And so we walked up a block, and lo and behold, the man and the lady that ran a rooming house were friends that Mother and Dad knew back in the middle of Florida years ago. I don't remember their names, but they did. Well, they put us on the train at midnight and sent us up to Reynolds' home up in Leesburg because they didn't have enough money to pay for anything, food or anything else there. And Mother and Dad rented that room and stayed there for the week. And then they got on the streetcar and rode out to the car line and saw this big building where we lived in Tampa. And the children's home was in it at that time because they were building a new children's home in Tampa. And they were moving out, I think, the next week. And then Mother and Dad took over the building. And a check came that it had been sent to the Canary Islands and forwarded back to us here. And in the check was a friend of ours in New York City. Now this is how, in Baltimore, Maryland, this was how the Lord took care of things. In it was $125. And the letter read, it's $25 for each one of the family. Well, Mother and Dad said that they were almost tempted to take that $100 and put it down for the month's rent for the big building that they were going to take. And they said no, they couldn't do it because it was designated for Edwin and Sugar and me too, you know. And we were up there in Leesburg, stranded with no money or anything. Edwin couldn't get to Macon because he didn't have the money to get up there to get to his brother and get him a job. And we were stranded there, and we stayed with Auntie and Uncle Reuben and the children. And Edwin worked there on the farm for 2 or 3 weeks there just to help out, and we helped around. And so they sent us the money, and that gave us a trip to Macon and back. Your mother and me, and gave Adrian the $25 to go and get started in Macon on what he was going to do.
For goodness.
And then the money came in for the first month's rent.
How did that happen? I don't remember.
Well, it was just sent to Mother and Dad. It was sent to them in the mail. Somebody that had known us in the Canaries and sent to us. And it wasn't designated for the work in the Canaries at all. It was designated to us personally so they could use it for that way. Then we paid that month's rent and the next month's rent, $100 a month. You know, got a great big 3-story building, nothing in it, empty. Every room was empty. We had a bed apiece to sleep on, which we had gone down to the store and just charged it, I guess. I don't know, I suppose they charged us. Got a bed apiece to sleep on, and that was all we had, and a little bit of an oil stove. And we rented that great big 3-story building in Tampa. And before we moved from there, it was full to overflowing flowing with beds and everything. We had 104 children and 12 workers. And they all didn't have any money to pay for any of it except as it came in. Well, anyway, the third month, no rent. The $100 didn't come. The man we were renting from came out, no rent. Couldn't pay it. It came out again, no rent. Came out again, no rent. Well, he didn't force it on us or anything, you know. And finally, we wondered why the rent hadn't come when it hadn't been coming, and money had been coming in before when we went to Canaries to take care of things. We paid, I've forgotten how much we paid for rent over there for this big house that we were in there. But we had to pay rent on it, and it always came in. Well, anyway, we had a lot down here at Safety Harbor. And Mother and Dad had bought years before we even went to Louisville. And they hoped someday to have a home on it, on the water, because it was the Gulf that went around there by Safety Harbor. So they had bought that lot. Well, that was the only thing in the world that we owned. We didn't have another thing anywhere. So we all got together and talked about it. We'd go down and sell that lot. That would pay our rent. So we did. We went down and sold that lot for $500, and that paid our rent. We stayed there 5.5 years, and never one time did the man come up to get the rent that we didn't have. 5.5 years from then on. And that was the last piece of thing that we owned, was that $500. Well, and then this similar circumstance happened out here when we moved out here. But I'll catch up with that from the go. Now, that's Aunt Cora. This is the picture. You can't see very good that.
Yes, I can.
And this is the 3 generations. My father and Earl and his little boy, Fred. And this is Fred when he's grown. This is Irene. Now, this is Miss Singer. I said you wouldn't I don't think you would remember her. Yeah. And this is a Reynolds family, and we were in there too when we were up at their house. And that's Laura. She was the youngest one. I think that's Reynolds up there. But anyway, it was taken when we were up there visiting, and this is just a group of us standing on the steps.
And there you all are with Uncle Ed and Aunt Elizabeth.
Okay.
So that's how Uncle Ed got started in Macon. He went to be with his brother Earl, who had already established himself
while you
went to the Canaries.
That's right.
And he married Emmy.
Yeah. Now this is Earl and Emmy, you see.
Now, do you remember when they married? What
They
year?
married in 1918. In July, they married on July the 14th, and Emmy was 18. No, she was 19 on July the 17th, and brother was 19 on July the 26th. And her birthday is the 17th of July. Mother's was the 17th of September. Brother's was the 26th of July, and my father's was 26th of September.
And Betty Earl's is the 26th of July.
And Eddie's too.
That's right.
And Fred's little boy, I don't have any of his pictures, but I showed you one of his boys. Well, his oldest little boy was born on the 27th of July, just after midnight. Missed the 26th just by a few hours. And this was taken not too long before he passed away.
Now, where did he meet Emmy?
Well, when we moved to Macon, you see, brother was, I was 16 and he was 14. And they went to high school together. And they went together from the time they were 14 till they were 18.
I see.
Yeah, they'd get mad at each other every now and then, go somebody else, but they always went back together. And this is Brother and Irene, and that's Brother and Fred. That's Fred when he's grown. That's Irene. That's Bob. Now this is Edwin and Elizabeth, and that's Eddie. Mm-hmm. Now there are pictures in there, probably of some of the others, but in here, because I couldn't get them all in, other pictures in there. And this is Fred and Emmy and Irene and
Eddie. And Uncle Ed and Elizabeth.
And here's Mother and Dad, and that's Brother and Emmy, and Irene, and Emmy and Elizabeth and Eddie. Elizabeth and Eddie. Edwin must have taken the picture.
Yes. And there's Uncle Ed and Elizabeth.
Yeah. And that's your Mother and Dad. I think that was her wedding. I'm not sure whether that was her wedding dress or her going away dress.
It looks like her going away
I think
dress.
it was her going away dress. There they were when you were born. And there's some pictures and these and this.
Chicago. And this is at Limona with my grandmother and my grandfather. And I remember my grandfather, but I don't remember grandmother.
No.
Except from the pictures, and of course I feel like I know her because I've seen so many pictures.
You see, Betty Earl was born in July, and she was gone in October of 1939. You see, and this is the picture there.
There's Mama and you and Mama.
Now in here. You don't have that.
Those are
I think that Betty Earl has one, I think. But if she doesn't, I have another one for her. I'm going to write and ask her about it. That's yours.
Beautiful.
And that's your mother sitting up in the tree.
Oh, I would love to have these framed.
Well, you can have them. You can get frames for them.
Nice old frames if I can find some. And I'd like to put them in some old frames. Picture of Mother and Daddy and Mother. Oh, that's wonderful.
Now, I don't know what Betty Earl has, so you all can...
we can share.
Yeah, that's it. You can do whatever you want to with those. They were just extra ones that I had. And
these are priceless.
She may have some, I don't know. Because I know she has some, but I don't know just what.
You have no idea how much those pictures you gave to me of Mother and Daddy sitting on the swing, and one of my grandmother, your mother's, your mother. I have the two little pictures sitting on my dresser.
Well, like I said,
Well,
now you have that, don't you?
Yes.
Now you said you
don't
didn't
have that.
Well, there's one for you. Now that's taken when Betty Earl got married, and I had the broken ankle and got the cast off just the day before for the wedding.
Right.
I just had visions of walking down the aisle in cast on.
Yes.
It's taken out in front of the church down here. Lighting, I tell you.
It's beautiful,
What's the
Mother.
matter with me that I can't turn on this light over here and give us more light in the room.
Okay. Now, tell about how long you were in Tampa and how you got out to Crystal Beach and how he found the property and that kind of thing.
Yes, we
Oh, good.
This is the building that we rented in Tampa. We paid $100 a month on and then didn't have the rent,
Can you imagine paying $100 a month for that huge building?
Right. 52 rooms. In
The whole building?
Mm-hmm.
It's just amazing.
Now I can tell you a little story about, there was a big yard on this side that had a fence around it, a vacant lot. Well, this building was on one block. That's from this street over to the next street. It was one block, and this was just on one corner of it. The girls used to play along the sidewalk. The boys had this big field over here where they played for baseball and so forth. Well, one day we built. You can't see it at the back. Well, you can see a little bit of it at the back, but I can show you another picture. Now you see, I have another picture. Let me see if I can come on. Focus one of them on. That was the Tampa Orchestra. Now that was on the side of the big building there that you saw in there. And here it is, there. And this was the yard. There was our first car there. And this was the yard there. Well, we built onto the back of the building. I don't think it shows it here. I don't think I have a picture. And we built a nursery upstairs on the second floor, back at the back of the building. It was connected onto the building, and underneath we built 2 schoolrooms. And I went all over Tampa looking for desks to put in those schoolrooms for the first and second grade. None to be had in Tampa. Couldn't find them anywhere. So a day or two, I don't know whether it was the next day or a day or two, some man came up the street up this way, coming down this way. And he came up to the house and he said to Dad, do you care if we go across your lot, kitty corner across your lot there? That would bring him from this corner back on the other side of the building, back of the building to the next street. We're moving a house down here, and we got it down at the corner. If we come up this way and go down that way, we have to fool around with, turn, and have to fool around with wires and so forth. Where if we could cut across your lot, we wouldn't have any of that to do with. And Dad said, well, it'd be all right if you put the fence back up when you get through. I said, well, they'd do that. He said, what are you doing? And he said, well, the house was used over here at the public school. It was 2 or 3 blocks. Belonged to some man, and they were using it for a schoolroom for the public school children in the public school. And Dad, by that time, had gotten down there, and he looked, and the building was full of school desks. And he said, well, what are you going to do with the desks? Oh, he said, discard them. They're no good. So they came right up to our schoolroom door. The boys unloaded the desks from that house into our building. We had enough for 2 rooms at 50 cents a piece.
Isn't that something?
And we couldn't buy them for love nor money anywhere.
And you had them delivered to the door.
Yeah, it didn't cost us anything.
Well, why couldn't you use these rooms? These were all bedrooms?
All bedrooms.
I see.
And the girls all roomed on the 2nd floor and the boys on the 3rd floor.
How many children did you have?
104.
Now, how did that get started? You've told that before, but I would like to hear it again.
Mother and Dad and your mother had gone to town, and I was there by myself. And the great began to building all by myself.
This is when you all came back from Leesburg.
Yes,
when you and Mother.
after we got back from Leesburg. And some woman came to bring us milk, I think it was, she was delivering. And she said, what are you going to do with this building? And I said, I don't know, we just rented it. We don't know, whatever the Lord wants us to do, we'll do. She said, would you consider taking a boy that doesn't have any home to live in? Said his mother works and she has the little girl with her. The little girl was 10, I think, and the little boy was 12. And said he doesn't have any place but just around on the streets. She said, will you take him? I said, well, I'll ask my father and mother when they come home from town about it. Next morning, the mother showed up with the boy in his clothes.
Didn't have a chance to
No,
ask.
didn't have a chance. I told him about it, but there it was dumped in our lap. And so from then on, it just grew. And they knew somebody. They knew a lady who had TB, and she had 4 children. Her husband was dead, and the health department wouldn't let her keep the children on account of her having TB. So she brought her 4 out there. Then there was the mother of this child. And there were 2 girls, and they were divorced, and neither one of their father who had married somebody else, his wife didn't want them, and their mother who married some man, he didn't want the girls, so they brought the 2 girls out there. So here they are, all those first children that we had, you see, that we took in. This was the first boy that we took, the boy that she brought the clothes for. These are the little Cuban children whose mother had TB. These are the 2 boys, and this is one girl, and this is the other girl. And this was one girl, and this is the other girl, these 2 sisters. So they were the 3 first families that we had. But we also had, now they were the ones that first came to live with us. We also had a day school, and we had all the Spanish children around about that their mothers and fathers worked in the cigar factory, and they didn't have they were under school age or just round about school age. Not any place to stay except out on the street. So they brought them to us, and we had a day nursery and had them in school. Years and years and years afterwards, we had 4 children in that family, day nursery children, and started them in the 1st grade. And they all spoke Spanish, but they didn't know much English because they spoke Spanish in the home, you see, and they had no chance to learn English. And years afterwards, the mother of those 4 children came all the way out here to tell us that her oldest son had just graduated from high school, and she said, if it hadn't been for you, you'd never, never have made it. But we connected the Spanish and the English together and taught him. I taught the 1st grade, and he was in my 1st grade pupil, and could help him, you know, to understand. And they learned English from the other children and went through our school and then went to public school and graduated from high school. She said they'd never made it if it hadn't been for our school.
That's right. All of you spoke Spanish because you had learned it in the Canaries.
Yes.
So
Not very good.
you had I know.
Your mother did, and Edwin was good at it, but Mother and Dad and I were not as good at it, not as fluent with it as they were. But it was enough to get along.
But you still
with
had a
it,
ministry to
yes,
those Spanish children that no one else could have.
We could connect it and get them to understand it, you see. That's a picture of Mother and Dad.
So you were in Tampa for
5.5 years. We had 3 children in this family. She was the youngest. And the 2 older ones, and the mother had just come to Tampa. She was only a few months old, and this one was. And the father worked on a boat, and he fell in the boat and was killed. And the mother had to go to Miami to have the funeral, and the lady that lived next door to where they were staying in Tampa brought the 2 older children out to the mission, and they lived with us all the time we were in Tampa, 5.5 years. And this little girl grew up with us there until we moved out here, and then the mother took them there. By that time she was working and could keep them.
Well, now, how did Grandfather get the idea of coming out to Crystal Beach?
Well,
how did
the
that
thing
happen?
of it was, all the place they had to play was, like I said, on the street,
and
you
lot.
see, and that lot. And so we decided, you see this book's laying out, along here. And we decided, in the streets, well, it was hot. So we decided we'd look around and see if we could find a place that was out of the city. And we went down here. We looked at, you know where Trinity College is in Tampa? We were down in Dunedin, and all that place along the water here, where those motels and things are, we looked at the building there. But that wasn't exactly what we wanted. We looked at the big hotel in Ozona and didn't like that. And while we were in Ozona, the man said, well, there's a place up at Crystal Beach, but said, I expected it'd be too expensive, more than you would want to pay. So we went on back to Tampa.
This was in 1928.
And we went on back to Tampa. And the agent that was had this building out here in Tampa, which, I mean, at Crystal Beach, you know which one it is that I show, the old building here that, you know which one it is. That,
Yeah,
this
the
one.
old hotel.
And he heard that we were looking for a building, so he made a trip over to Tampa to tell us about it.
Oh.
And he said, I'll meet you out there and let you look at it. It never had made a success as a hotel out here because there was no bus that ran here and people were stranded. They just couldn't get to buy anything or do anything, so it didn't make a go as a hotel.
Now this, had the Depression hit already?
Well, in 28, we'd had more or less some kind of, kind of a real estate
Boom.
boom and
Crash.
fall. Yes, crash before that. But the Depression was a little later than that.
Oh, I thought this hotel had gone broke during that crash.
No,
of the real estate
it just
market.
never made a success as a
I
hotel.
see.
And the reason was because they were way out here, like in the country, and there was no store here, not anything, where they could even get out of here if they didn't have a car. And elderly people that came down from the north on the train were just stuck here, and that was it. So it never made a success. So we looked at the building. The minute we walked in the front door, we said, that's it. Mother and Dad said, that was it. Didn't even have to look at the rest of it. So he made arrangements for Mother and Dad to go up and meet Mr. Arnold, Mr. and Ms. Arnold, in Tarpon Springs
Now,
on Saturday.
Who was Mr. and Mrs. Arnold?
He was the owner of the building.
Now, had he built this hotel?
No,
Oh.
he and another man owned it.
Okay.
And so made arrangements for them to go up on Saturday to meet Mr. Arnold and talk with him about it. Well, Mother and Dad went up to meet him, and when he found out we had children, he said no, he would not rent to children. They just put spoons and everything else down the toilets and ruin the plumbing and ruin everything else. Mother said, no, just wait a minute. He said, not our children. And so they rented the building to us for $100 a month. So that was on Saturday. Tuesday we were living in the building. We moved down Tuesday afternoon.
Daudie.
We paid our
Now, were
first
there
month's rent.
beds and things here already?
Yes, because it was furnished as a hotel.
So you just moved in?
Moved in. We bought all our baby beds and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But aside from that, the beds were here, single beds too, and so they didn't have to be on double beds.
Now, what did you do with the building then in Tampa?
Well, we rented. Somebody else took over the mission for a while, and then they closed it completely because they were not.
They couldn't make a go of it.
Make it down here.
Okay, so you got moved in on Tuesday.
Yeah, Tuesday, and that was 50 years ago. Last year.
50 years ago in
June last year, June the 20th, 1978.
June 28th,
1978.
1978.
No, yes.
Was 50-year anniversary.
And no, it wasn't June the 28th. It was June the 13th, 1928.
1928.
Mm-hmm. But it was 50 years ago, you see, last year. And so they, everything's changed now, The beach is so different. From
I
it used to
know.
be.
But can you tell about how the workers came and how, did you move, all right, you moved all the children that were living with you
Not all
out
of
here.
them. We only brought, now these are the ones we brought. These are the ones that we brought down here.
Mm-hmm.
Only those that belong to the mission. Those that didn't belong to the mission went back to their parents. You see, we had a lot of children that were from broken homes, and they went back to their parents, or whoever it was. But the children that belonged to the home, that grew up in the home, were the ones that came down here.
Well,
now here they are. Here's the group.
Uh-huh.
Here. That's the way they looked when we moved down here. And here, these were the babies.
Mm.
And these are the ones that here. All of these are the ones that we, some of these are same children as here,
Well, now, how did that work legally? Did the mission adopt them, or was there
No.
no?
No, they just were given to us because they didn't, usually the parents didn't have any way, maybe from broken homes, death or something, and they had to make, and some of them had remarried, and they didn't want the child for that reason. So it was just different reasons with different children.
And the welfare, the state welfare department or the child welfare department wasn't active at that time.
No, they didn't come in until in the in the 30s, sometime in the 30s or something. You see, up till that time there was nothing. We worked with the juvenile court in Tampa, and out here too, because a lot of the children came through the juvenile court. They had children that, and some came from the children's home in Tampa. We had several children from there that were not adoptable, and sometimes their history was not where they could be adopted, or some physical reason or something that way. And so the lady that was in the juvenile court was a friend of ours that we had known way back in Kentucky. We didn't know we had anybody friends in Tampa when we moved there. And so she was working in the juvenile court. So when she found out we were there, well, out she came. And she was the one that used to go and pick up these children all over Tampa where they were in need of a home to place them, you know. And she would place a lot of them with us. And in that way, we worked with the juvenile court all the time.
And did they give monies? Did they have money available for support? So tell a little bit about how you...
No one, not anybody, ever gave us money. We never asked for money, never took collection. If a collection was ever taken, somebody else did it. We did. And we gave programs, but we never took collections. And so they, but some of them would, just because they wanted to. And so we took children from the state even, and they never paid us a penny. We wouldn't have accepted it anyway, because that would throw us under them to do as they said, you see, and we didn't want to do that. So we didn't accept money from anybody. We had different organizations became interested, and different churches became interested. The first time when we had the first cold spell we had in Tampa, we didn't have any covering at all. Just the children and all of us didn't need it during the summer. You know, sheets were all we needed. But when it came to the blanket time, we didn't have any because we didn't need it. You hadn't needed it. And one of the ministers in Tampa that was interested in the work got together with some of the different church members, and they gave us a donation of 100 blankets. They were just these cotton blankets, but in those days, the days were not as cold as they are now, you know. And those blankets were warm enough. And, you know, we still have a few of those blankets that we've used all those years, and they're over 50 years old, 56 years old nearly, 55. And so in that way, one thing after another was supplied from one organization or another, you know, that got interested in different churches. And when we were in Tampa there, they started digging along the street up toward our building, and Dad said, well, what are you doing? They said, we're running natural gas into your building. Well, we hadn't ordered it or had any say so about you putting it in there. That didn't make any difference. Some women's organization in Tampa was giving a gas stove, and they gave us a 12-burner gas stove with 2 big ovens and had the gas piped in.
Well, now, could you take that stove with you?
Yes, we brought it out here. But it wasn't any good out here because we didn't have gas, natural gas out here, you see.
So
we had we had a big wood stove. We used that for a while, and then we sold that and had to get electric because that was the only thing
Goodness, did Grandfather have to cut all the wood for his wood stove to cook on?
Well, that's what we had to do. Whatever was around, we could get, you know. We had donations, people gave us things. I know one time we used to find a dozen eggs or find a sack of eggs on our front porch every day, every Monday morning. And we didn't know where some of those eggs were coming from, fresh eggs. And a long, long time afterwards, a man told us that he and his wife had quite a few chickens, and they said they promised the Lord that whatever the chickens laid on Sunday, they'd bring to the mission. And said they laid more eggs on Sunday than they did any other day of the week. And we got the sack of eggs every Monday morning.
That was their tithe.
And then well, another time we had the Coca-Cola company came up to the backyard, up to the back door in the old building, and Mother told me to go down to the store and pick up 5 pounds of sugar that one of the neighbors was giving us every week. And we'd make some syrup and have biscuits and syrup for dessert for dinner, because everybody loved that. And before I got down there to get the sugar and we get back up here and make the syrup, the Coca-Cola company drove up to the back door and left us, I don't remember whether it was 100 bottles of syrup or it was a big amount of syrup already made.
Goodness.
Didn't have to make it at all.
Huh.
Coca-Cola company. And the Ringling brothers got interested in us in Tampa, and they put in the bank $500 and said that we were talking then about getting a home for the children out from the city. And they said that whenever we found the right place, that would be the first down payment on it. So when Mr. Arnold, I was telling you about, when he said he wouldn't rent us the building, you remember. And that's where we stopped. And he wouldn't rent us the building because the children wouldn't take care of it. Mother said, don't worry. He said, they won't do that. So he rented us the building at $100 a month. And we went on for paying $100 a month for quite some time on the building. Every Sunday, Mr. and Miss Arnold and their 2 girls would come out and visit with us out here. They just were crazy. You know, Miss Arnold still sends us $10 every few months. He's gone, but she said that was one of his dying requests, not to forget to send us $10 every now and then. And that's been over 50 years ago.
Well, now, how did Grandfather acquire the building then?
Well, then we rented for a while. Then all of a sudden the rent didn't come in. And we didn't have any money to pay the rent. Mr. Arnold never once said, you haven't paid your month's rent. If we had $10 to pay on the rent that month, okay. If we had $15 or $20, okay. If we didn't have anything, it was all right. He never said, you haven't paid your rent, will you pay? Well, that went on for 2 years. And we couldn't understand why. Everything else came, but no money for rent. And very little money. That was during the Depression. Very little money came in food and things like that, you know, but not money that we could take for rent. So, but like I said, Mr. Arnold never said a word. At that time, there was a lady in Tarpon Springs who was very much interested in starting a children's home. She had an apartment building in Tarpon, and she had some lots out on the other side of Tarpon. I used to know just about where they were. And she'd gone out there and laid a foundation for a children's home, because that's what she wanted. She up and died. And her estate went to the court. And the court said, well, that's the silliest thing under the sun. Nobody to run the home, no children to put in the home, and nothing out there. Give it to Faith Mission. So they gave the apartment building to us, and the lots up there that belonged to us. And this building was no good to Mr. Arnold, but was just what we needed. So we swapped and gave him all the property which he could sell off little at a time up there, and was no good to us. Gave him the property that was left up there in exchange for the building down here.
How wonderful.
And we took over the mortgage. And little by little, the mortgage came in. And then all of a sudden, we got a letter from out in California. Somebody out there, you see, they had a lot of tourists that used to come out here, and they got interested in it. Sent in the last payment on the mortgage. And that cleared it. So it was dedicated in 1933, and it was clear. No money due on it.
Well, now, how did the name Faith Mission?
Well, when we were in Tampa, you see, we had used it there.
Mhm.
We just
You just thought of
Just
it when you
thought of
got
it,
to
mhm.
Tampa. I
because
was
we were living by faith, and
Right.
it was the mission work, you know. So that's the reason we used it that way.
well. Then, let's see. That was in 1933 that you dedicated the
The building.
building,
Mhm.
and I suppose during that time other places were being built around here after.
Well, not too many, because when we first moved here, we weren't but 35 homes in Crystal Beach.
Mm.
And you see how it's built up now. And so that, we acquired that. And then this property, the little cottage over here, you saw that after it's been fixed up inside.
Mhm.
And this building belonged to a man from Canada. And we acquired it from him. Bought this property, which included this corner lot. And somebody gave us the lots up here where where Miss Tennant is, where those apartments are. And that was years and years ago, which we thought, they thought maybe we might build a church there at one time. But it wasn't large enough.
Mhm.
So then when this property was, when we got that property, we built the church there instead of up here.
Now, when was the church built?
It was built in 47
Mhm.
and dedicated in January of 48, and Dad was gone in September of 48.
Mm.
He was only in it 1 month.
Mm. What a shame. He had such dreams for that tabernacle, as he called it.
And see, Earl drew the plans for it.
Mhm.
And the windows, he went into Tampa and found a man who had brought glass over from the old country, and all of that glass in those colored windows came from this Bohemian man, and he made the windows and put them in. And the doors, you know, heard about the doors, didn't you? Well, they're from the Astoria Hotel in New York City. Those
I
big
didn't know
doors.
that.
And they were, when Dad was looking for some doors to put in the church, we call it tabernacle then, but the church, some man told him that there was some doors down in St. Petersburg. He said, they're stored down there. They were sent down here to use in the Ringling Brothers Museum in St. Petersburg, in Bradenton, but Sarasota, but they aren't large enough. And so Dad went around and saw them, bought them for $15, and then we built around the doors. Around the doors. Made the church fit the doors.
Around the doors.
Made the church fit the doors.
Well, Grandfather had a good business head, didn't he? He really knew how to.
Yeah.
Well, he used things as a stewardship.
Yes.
You know, he really. The parable of the talents, I think he really understood and applied.
Well, his father was a businessman, and Dad was too. Always was.
But it's always been a mystery to me how he could buy. Of course, property then wasn't anything.
Well, we could have bought the Fenway Hotel. It's now the Trinity College for what we paid for this out here, and they wanted us to buy it. They came out here and wanted us to buy it. But we didn't have any money at that time, you see, and we weren't interested in that anyway because it's too much in town. This was better. And a lot of it was given to us. We had property, some lots down in that section of town that were given to us, and some in another section. And we got the camp building.
How did you get the camp?
Well,
that was an old YMCA?
The camp. It had been built, they'd had a YMCA building up here, camp up here at Wall Springs. And the girls liked that because they had fresh water to swim in. But that burned. That was before we came down here. Year before, I think. And so they came down here. The people that owned the parsonage where your dad lives now, owned that building and a lot of property here on the beach. And so they gave that camp property to the YWCA to build down there. Well, they built there, but the girls never liked it because they didn't like salt water, and it's not good swimming down there either, you know. So they didn't like it down there, and always went somewhere else. And so it stood idle for some time, and then they had to hire somebody to stay in it, caretaker, to take care of it. along about the time that we needed some extra space for the boys that were outgrowing the building, outgrowing this building. And so we had a chance to buy that. It's along the same time we bought the place where your dad lives. You know what we paid for that building? $7,000.
That's just unbelievable.
And I think we
Now
paid,
that belonged to an old English doctor, though.
Well, he was a man from, and they owned a lot of property in Crystal Beach. He was a doctor from California that moved to Crystal Beach. It was his second wife, I think. And they were all, he died just before we moved here. They built the house, and I think he lived in it one winter and then died. And she was still living here. And then she got sick and died.
What was their name?
Handy. Dr. Handy. And then she got sick and died, and so her sister came from California. That's something to show you. Her sister came from California and lived in the house for some time, and she said, I held the building for you all because I wanted you to have it.
Really?
And so that's how we had. Now that's the way Crystal Beach looked when we moved down here.
Oh, I remember the arch. Isn't that something?
And very few of these books around. I have one, but I don't think anybody else has one.
Probably ought to copy that. You ought to have that copied, Daudie.
Now look, see, this is the way it was before we came down here. Some of these people that came in here, Crystal Beach, Pinellas County, Florida, is a town on the Gulf of Mexico. That was when they were trying to make it go as
resort
to her place.
Daudie, you know, you can take this and have this copied. And you probably ought to, I'd like to have a copy. But don't let the original get out of your hands.
No.
Because,
well, now what concerns me is, I do not know who's going to take care of us when I'm gone. These books, and this, and I have, well, you can look at those pictures while I get the other book to show you.
well, Daudie, Betty Earl and I will take care
Well,
of
that's it.
that.
It'll be up to you two.
Miss Crystal Beach. Who is Miss Crystal Beach? Boy, this was a good promotional booklet they put out here. Office of the Crystal Beach Development Company. Wonder where that was.
Huh?
Wonder where that was. Where is the Perry home now? Is it still here?
Oh, wait a minute, I'll tell you where those.
Here's the corner of Mayo and Crystal Beach Avenues. Now, this is the inn, isn't it? This is a picture of the inn, looking up Crystal Beach Avenue. And here's the pier that Mama used to talk about. She and Daddy used to walk out there. Well, this is priceless. I wish you could get this copied before. If we just had a couple of copies, then at least we would have the material. We wouldn't have the original. But if you take this to somebody who makes good copies.
But now here, now this is Dad's. He was one of the speakers at his graduation from the seminary. He was the first, I think, the first one from Florida that ever was a speaker. And it's all on the home.
Hmm.
And because he was always, he and Mother were always interested in the home. The home. These are big pictures, you see, of the children. Now,
well, he certainly knew how to develop all the resources he could possibly develop to make the work go.
Yeah. Now
They
you
must have
see-
worked all the time. They must have been thinking all the time about
Yeah, we
how to
were.
make it go.
Now these are the leaflets, like I have given you a set,
Mm-hmm.
so you can read about it, you know.
Okay.
But these are write-ups that were in the paper.
Is that Stipmer?